Okay, so are you ready for this deep dive? It's called The Teacher's Story, and it's about a blog post we found called The Parent Who Asked Me Out on a Date.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty wild, and gives you a look at the stuff teachers have to deal with outside of the classroom, like when things get kind of awkward.
Yeah, like what kinds of awkward?
Well, so this teacher, Miss Akinlolu Adewale, she's an English teacher over in Nigeria.
Okay.
And she really cares about building good relationships, with parents and students.
Yeah, you kind of have to as a teacher.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's what's so interesting about this whole story. Because she's like, yeah, I got this great rapport with everyone, including this one dad, Mr. Adewale.
Okay.
He seems like the perfect parent, super involved, always complimentary, wants the best for his son, Tunde.
Sounds like a dream parent, right?
Right. But then things get a little weird.
Uh,
Like looking back, there were probably little red flags all along.
what do you mean? Like what kinds of red flags?
Just little things like lingering a bit too long after meetings or sending emails that were like a tad too personal.
I guess it can be hard to tell sometimes with those things.
Yeah. And in real life, it's not like a horror movie where you can yell at the screen.
Right?
But anyway, so one Friday afternoon, this Mr. Adewale shows up at Miss Akinlolu's classroom all dressed up.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like this isn't going to be about Tunde's grades.
Yeah, you got it. And that's when it hits her. This visit is definitely not about Tunde.
Oh, boy.
And then, bam, he just asks her out to dinner.
Whoa, no way. That's so inappropriate. What would you have done?
Honestly, I think I would have been totally speechless.
Right. It's like, how do you even respond to that?
Yeah, and it's a total power dynamic thing too, right?
Totally. He's using his position as a parent to put her on the spot.
It's a situation that immediately puts her in a vulnerable position.
Definitely.
But you know what? She handles it like a proposition.
Really?
She keeps her cool and just shuts down the proposition. But politely, emphasizes that she's there for Tunde and, got to keep things professional.
That's smart.
But he doesn't give up right away.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah, he tries to play it off like, oh, we're both adults. What's the harm in a friendly dinner?
Wow. That's like straight out of a textbook on manipulation tactics.
Right. It's like he's trying to gaslight her into thinking she's overreacting.
Ugh, that's awful.
So Miss Akinlolu just doubles down and says, nope, anything that could jeopardize my role as Tunde's teacher is off limits.
That's such a powerful statement. It shows she's not willing to compromise her integrity.
Definitely. He finally gets the message and leaves. But I bet she was like totally freaked out.
Yeah. I can only imagine spending the whole weekend just replaying that in my head.
Exactly. And wondering like, did I handle that right? Should I report this?
Ugh. It's so hard in those situations. You just start to second guess yourself.
Right. So Monday morning rolls around and Miss Akinlolu decides to talk to her head of department, Mrs. Osagi, about the whole thing.
Good for her. I always say talking it out can really help.
And that's when things get really interesting.
Oh, how so?
Well, it turns out this kind of thing isn't as uncommon as you might think.
Really?
Yeah. Mrs. Osagi says other teachers have experienced similar situations.
Oh, wow.
And her advice: document everything.
That's good advice. It's like she's saying protect yourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because who knows what could happen, right?
Yeah, it's scary to think about.
It really is. And you know what else this whole thing shows?
What's that?
Schools need better support systems in place for teachers.
100%. They shouldn't have to deal with this stuff alone.
For sure. So this whole thing really ends up being a wake-up call for Miss Akinlolu.
How so?
Well, it makes her realize that setting clear boundaries is super important.
Right. You have to protect yourself.
And seeking support when you need it.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to talk to someone.
Definitely.
And also trusting your gut instinct.
Yeah, if something feels wrong, it probably is.
So many good lessons to learn from this one uncomfortable encounter.
That's for sure. And it's not just for teachers either, right? These are lessons we can all apply to our lives.
Totally, like recognizing those red flags, setting boundaries. Those are crucial life skills for everyone.
Absolutely. I mean, we can all learn something from Miss Akinlolu's experience, right?
Definitely.
It's all about setting those boundaries right from the start.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like drawing a line in the sand and saying, nope, not crossing this.
Right. And as a teacher especially.
Oh, totally. Because you're constantly interacting with everyone, students, parents, colleagues.
Exactly. So you got to be extra clear about keeping things professional.
Yeah, like with Miss Akinlolu, she talked about making a real effort to keep all her interactions with parents focused on school stuff.
Right. But let's be honest, that can be tough sometimes.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah?
You want to be friendly, build rapport.
Yeah, but without sending the wrong message.
It's a balancing act for sure.
And even when you think you're doing everything right, sometimes those boundaries still get tested.
Like with this whole Mr. Adewale situation, she was doing everything by the book.
But it didn't stop him.
Nope.
Well,
So what can you do?
Well, you got to have a plan. You got to know how to handle those situations when they pop up.
Like, what would you do?
Well, like Miss Akinlolu, respond with firmness, but respectfully.
Oh, yeah. You don't want to make things worse.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But you also got to be clear that their behavior is not okay.
And she did a great job of that. Just shut it down nice and clean.
Yep. No beating around the bush. No giving them a chance to misinterpret anything.
Just straight to the point.
And you know what else? If you ever feel uncomfortable or threatened in any way,
Like really unsafe.
yeah, don't hesitate to get help. Talk to someone.
Which is exactly what Miss Akinlolu did when she told her head of department, Mrs. Osagi.
Smart move.
Okay.
And you know what's crazy? Mrs. Osagi was like, oh yeah, this kind of thing happens more than you'd think.
Seriously.
Yeah, which is so messed up, right?
It's scary.
Makes you realize there's a bigger problem here, you know?
Yeah, like a system-wide issue that needs to be addressed.
Exactly. And it shows how important it is to talk about these things.
Get it out in the open.
Yep. And that's why Mrs. Osagi's advice is so important.
The whole document everything thing.
Yes. That can be a lifesaver.
Especially if things escalate.
It's all about protecting yourself, you
Yeah.
know? Having proof of what happened.
Right. Because it shouldn't just be your word against theirs.
And it sends a message, you know? We're not going to tolerate this kind of behavior.
So, taking a step back from this story for a second,
Okay.
what are some things we can all learn from this? Even if we're not teachers.
Well, first of all, we got to be aware of those subtle signs that someone might be testing boundaries.
Like those little red flags we talked about.
Yeah, like lingering too long,
Mm.
overly personal emails, that sort of thing.
When you get that icky feeling.
Trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is.
And if you're ever in a situation like Miss Akinlolu's, remember, you're not alone.
There are people who can help.
Talk to someone you trust, a friend, a colleague, a mentor.
And don't be afraid to seek professional help if you need it.
And remember what Mrs. Osagi said. Document everything.
It's all about protecting yourself.
So shifting gears a bit, what does all this mean for us, the listeners? We're not teachers, but we care about education, right?
It means we need to recognize that teachers face all sorts of challenges.
Stuff that goes way beyond the classroom.
Yeah, it can be tough and stressful and sometimes even scary.
So we need to understand those pressures.
And support them.
Be advocates for them.
Because when teachers feel supported,
They can do their jobs better.
exactly, they can focus on teaching and inspiring.
And that benefits everyone, right?
Absolutely. Students, parents, the whole community.
It's a win-win for everyone.
Totally.
You know, this story really makes you think, huh? Like we talk about all the challenges teachers face in the classroom.
Oh, yeah, the disruptive students, all the testing.
But what about all the stuff that happens outside the classroom?
Right. Like the things people don't really talk about.
It's like a whole hidden side to the job.
Totally. Like all the emotional stuff and having to constantly set boundaries and deal with those tricky relationships.
It's a lot to handle.
Yeah.
And this story about Miss Akinlolu really brings those hidden challenges to light.
Yeah. It makes you realize being a teacher, it's not just about standing up there giving lessons.
Right. It's so much more than that.
There's this huge responsibility to protect yourself, too,
And advocate for your own well-being.
which we don't always talk about.
And I bet there are tons of other situations like what happened with Mr. Adewale, you know,
Oh, yeah. Probably even worse.
but maybe not as like dramatic or obvious.
Right. Like little things that happen all the time.
Like those microaggressions or offhand comments or when someone's just a little too friendly
Yeah. And those things can really add up over time.
and chip away at your confidence.
Exactly. That's why it's so important for teachers to have support.
To know they're not alone in this,
Have people they can talk to,
like colleagues and administrators who get it.
who have their back.
But it goes beyond just having people to talk to, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like schools need to have clear systems in place.
Policies and procedures for reporting these kinds of incidents.
So teachers know what to do if something happens.
And that the issue will be taken seriously.
So if a teacher does report something,
Yeah.
what happens then?
Right. Is there a proper investigation?
Are there consequences for people who behave inappropriately?
These are important questions.
Because if we want to really support teachers,
you need to make sure those systems are actually working.
we can't just talk about the problem.
We have to do something about it.
And I think it's even bigger than just the school level.
Yeah.
It's about how we view teachers as a society.
Right. Like, do we respect them?
Do we value their work?
Do we understand how important their job is?
They're shaping future generations, after all.
Exactly. So we need to treat them accordingly.
Give them the support they deserve.
and understand that their job goes way beyond just teaching.
So I want to leave you with a question to think about.
Okay.
What can we do to support teachers?
Both individually and as a community?
How can we help create a world where teachers feel safe and respected?
And empowered to do what they do best.
Because this whole conversation, it started with one uncomfortable encounter.
But it's brought up so many important issues.
Issues that we all need to be thinking about.
And talking about.
And taking action on.
Because ultimately, supporting teachers benefits everyone.
That's right. It makes for better schools, better communities, and a better future for us all.